wow, this feels so much more official than last week.
Absolutely.
No, but I was saying it would take a long time, and it would always feel so draining afterwards. So I really liked we recorded here for the first time last week. Well, not for the first time. The very first episode we ever did was actually here.
Yeah,
Just,
right
it
where
was
we are seated. Actually,
different orientation.
Yeah.
But the one we did last week here felt like we were in and we're out. We just came, delivered our content, and that was it, which felt so
efficient.
Yeah, I really liked it. So shout out to Summer Box. Yeah.
Plus, you also get your weekends back now.
Yes,
so that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry?
You get your weekends back.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, which is
I'm sure
a big
Jen
one.
likes that for his golf. Yeah.
yes. Sandra also likes that for us. She's like,
okay.
You're recording every weekend.
Yeah. Guys get to spend more time together.
I was gonna say, so you said you've done podcasts before, but the one you did that was an audio one. How did it feel different from like a video one?
So actually, I had a power outage. So I was literally sitting on the floor of my apartment trying to get light. So I like positioned myself in front of like a nice white wall where there was a bit of light coming in. And my battery died literally 2 seconds after I got off the call with the person.
Okay, so it worked out. So it was a video podcast, but you were doing it remotely.
Yeah, so he was in Australia and I was in Nairobi.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, he reached out and said, oh, like I work in this space. I would love to have a chat with you. I said, sure, I'm always open to having a conversation about resilience. And then it was really nice. I didn't realize that there was going to be no like visuals.
Okay, so
but when he published it, it's just like he does it on Spotify.
Okay.
So yeah, it was quite
but
nice.
you thought it was video, but it was
I was like, oh my goodness, there's no light in this place. Like, what am I gonna do?
I actually wanted to understand because we've never done an audio only podcast. I wonder, like, if when you do that, is the approach different? Do you just show up and we're in sweatpants? It's very relaxed. Because here it's like, you have to get ready because this is gonna be
probably easier.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I did I just had a normal top on and I had my pajamas on the bottom, and I was sitting on a cushion, like
business casual, the work from home business casual.
I guess it's like when you do webinars and things, like you only have a professional from the top up.
Yeah, except if someone says, "Oh, you need to go to that door," and then you get up and they're like, "This guy's in boxers."
Well, that was a lot of calls during COVID when people would be attending work calls. And then somebody would stand, and then everybody would be very embarrassed because you had a suit on.
Literally, one of my really good friends, we call it his lucky shorts. They're like so short and so red, but because he works for an investment bank, he has to be suited on the top.
Yep.
So he has these little long socks on and these tiny shorts, and he's like doing all these fancy meetings.
Yep, that's COVID for you. Okay, all right, let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of the Full Scale Podcast. Today, we are excited to host one of the most passionate people about startups you would ever meet, Amitty Peace.
Hi.
Amity is the founder of Mangrove, a resilience platform designed to help businesses grow stronger and build stronger foundations, grow faster, and reduce failure rates by providing tools to assess and improve operational efficiency. Mangrove empowers businesses to make data-driven decisions and avoid costly mistakes. We are delighted to have you, Amity, with us, and we look forward to an exciting interaction.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice.
Wonderful. Maybe you could begin by telling us a bit about yourself. Who is Amity? What, if somebody met and say that they know Amity, what would they say?
Okay. Well, I'll start by my background. I'm Australian. So I grew up all over Australia, lots of different places. So I think I have a nice diverse upbringing, which is really like country, city. So I think that also plays a big part in why and where the places that I'm attracted to. And then for a couple of years, I decided to just go out and explore the world and see how I could maybe enhance my skills. So I spent a lot of time traveling. I've lived and worked in about 20 countries now. So
wow.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Impressive. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Anytime I get a new client, I'm like, okay, let me just try and live in this country and see how things go. So yeah, I think I'm an avid traveler and I'm very passionate about, I guess, communication, exploring and enjoying new things. I think with new things, you get new exposure and new learnings. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Lived in 20 different countries. I'm definitely going to have to ask you which one was your best 5 or something like that?
So I struggle with this question a lot because the way that I think of a country adding value is like, what did I learn whilst I was there? So I think like every country has been impactful in its own special way. I don't necessarily have favorites.
Okay.
I think like each place added value. So yeah, that's
Wow.
really hard to like
Best
determine.
lesson learned?
Yeah, I think the best lesson that I learned was probably when I went to Rwanda for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, this place is stunning and there's so much going on. And that's where I like fully, I think, got to understand the startup ecosystem in Africa. And then I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Wow.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome. I've
yeah.
never been to Rwanda, but everyone
Yeah.
speaks very highly. So it's definitely on my list.
It has to be. And it's just a few hours away.
I
So
know.
there's no excuse, right?
Road trip,
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, definitely. Me, road trip any day. Road trip any day.
Okay, so
Yeah.
tell us about your company. First of all, how do you pronounce? Is it Mangrove?
Yeah, like the plants.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is Mangrove? What do you do? What does Mangrove do? And why Mangrove? Why that name?
Okay, so I can tell you the backstory of why it's called Mangrove.
Okay.
So I'm like a pretty straightforward and I think like practical person. So the company used to be called Fixity because we fix people's
Fixity.
problems.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this lovely person reached out to me called Charles and said, your company name is so shit. And I was like, okay, Charles, like, what does this mean for me then? And he was like, don't worry, I'll come back to you shortly. So a couple of weeks later, he came back and he had come up with a name and branding. And he explained to me the importance of storytelling around your business. And he was like, yeah, there you go. So he worked and like helped me do a bunch of stuff. It was really lovely. And like since then, I think it's really changed the way that people understand what we do as a business. Because, the mangrove is kind of the stabilizer of the ecosystem. It's where things come to renew themselves. It's really good for growth, stability. So like there's this beautiful storytelling element to the name, which I think really suits what we're trying to do with the business. So yeah. That's the backstory of the name.
Awesome. And what does the business do?
Okay, yes. So originally what the business was doing was trying to fix a problem in the industry around operational resilience. So operational resilience exists for larger companies. So these are financial institutions, big tech companies, people that have some type of touch point to the financial industry. They have to implement this regulation, which is called operational resilience. And so I did this for about 10 years. I started realizing there was a lot of problems. And then I thought I also had a very bad experience with a boss. And I was like, pretty sure like we could automate this and we wouldn't have these problems. So that's where the idea of Mangrove came from. But during the pandemic, I found myself in Kenya and I started connecting with amazing people and I started building my business. And what I found is all of the strategies and systems that I had been building for these bigger companies around optimization and scaling were also really important and really helpful for founders who were trying to build their business. And then that's where I kind of discovered that space. And on the flip side of that, we had a lot of investors. They don't necessarily understand what good operations look like, nor how to ask questions around this. So effectively what Mangrove does is it's I would say like the conduit between investors and scale-ups and teaching them about what an operationally viable company looks like, something that's also efficient and it can scale sustainably. So that's the space that I kind of work in.
Wow, I think that's really, really cool. There's just one thing I want to parse out, which I think Tim will sort of speak to it a bit more later, but just to get, if you had to sum up what is operational resilience, like what do you describe that as?
So I would say it's like sustainable growth and operational excellence.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And that includes reducing wastage, wasted resources, or putting resources in places where you're getting least results.
The way that I've learned how to describe what operational resilience is with food, because I'm very good I love food. I'm a foodie. So it's like if you have a business and say, for instance, your business wants to sell cakes, right? So you have, as a founder, maybe like 100 ingredients in front of you. And at the end, you're making a cake, but you don't necessarily know which ones are my most important, which ones don't I need. And effectively, which are the ones that the customer needs to be able to deliver the product or the service. So I use an analogy like, okay, if you're making cakes as a business, but we take out bicarbonate soda, you end up with pancakes, right?
Okay.
So what I try and do is help businesses understand their user journey,
Mhm.
all of the pieces that are required. So this is kind of like the processes,
Mhm.
the technologies, the third parties, and the people to deliver those services to your customer. And so that's where we kind of orient the business around that. And then you can understand what are your bottlenecks, where processes slow down, your concentration risks. Maybe there's a person who has too much knowledge, concentrated. Maybe there's a third party that's your single point of weakness. And also, because we know your recipe, here are the 7 ingredients that you don't need and could save you money. And you can reinvest that into your operations.
Wow, that's really cool way you explain it. So maybe there are too many ingredients, maybe there are too many cooks in the kitchen. I sort of like that analogy. I think it makes it a lot easier. Thank you. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now to build onto that, what do you think the common reasons why startups fail, and how do operational inefficiencies contribute to the failure?
Okay, so I think there's like 2 parts to that question. The first part, I just think the way that we're telling people to build businesses is not correct. It's like, find a problem that you're interested in building a solution for. Now make this amazing story where people can give you money. Forget about the product, forget about the problem, 100% forget about the people that you're trying to serve, and then just focus on exiting. But there's like a million steps in between these processes. And so I don't think that there's enough information available to scale ups and startups to really build operations. So you look at a lot of the accelerators or the incubation, it's really focused on the preliminary elements of just trying to get a business off the ground and ideation. And then the solution is, okay, you have money, like you can go and build a business that's going to be successful. And then you see this perpetual cycle of like raising money, and then eventually failing when the money runs out. And the only reason they were able to scale that big is because they had consistent injections of money to keep them going. So I think that's the issue, is really just the foundations of how we tell people to build a business. And we need more education and more information around what that looks like.
Absolutely. So you find that a business is only being propped because it has capital flowing in, and not necessarily because it has built operational efficiencies. It's capable of scaling some shocks. As soon as the money runs out, there's nothing to support it or prop it. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have a look at like a lot of the really big companies that have scaled, they either sell before they fail, so then they're considered a success, or they grow to a certain size, they reach the particular status that everyone is wanting them to, and then it's a house of cards. They just effectively start to fall in on each other. So I guess that's where I used to work, is I would see these big companies, they would reach out to me and say, now we need you to reverse engineer this. So my job would be like to go into the company, clean all their dirty laundry, and then help them to understand what like an operationally sound and viable company would look like, and all of the pieces that are needed for their delivery to their customers.
Absolutely. And just quickly, so what do you think is the biggest operational blind spot for most startups? I mean, from your experience working with such businesses, what do you think tends to be the biggest blind spot for founders and for growing businesses?
I think it's just like not understanding your operations. A lot of it sits in people's heads. So the key element to what we do at Mangrove is we try to like basically put a mirror in front of your business and give you a visual component. And I love actually building out these pieces of the business, because in the beginning you have people kind of sitting there, they're really confused, like, why am I doing this? What does this mean? But then when you show them the visual output, it's like an aha moment.
Like how everything fits in.
Yeah, exactly. So we basically map out all of the services that you deliver. So these are like your core components of your business. So we like to call these like your secret sauce. Yeah. And so when they see that and they have the aha moment, it completely changes. And then you see that like that reflection in my head, it looked like this, but I see how it looks in front of me now. And so I think that's something that's really lacking, is that clarity over what your operations actually looks like versus how you think it looks.
Interesting.
Very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to paint it. It's like you're maybe doing a lot of things, but you don't really know why things fit together or what your secret sauce is, what's really making you move forward as a business.
Yeah.
Really cool. And you mentioned sort of foundations, and if we had stronger foundations to some of these businesses, perhaps they'd be more resilient.
Yes.
What does a strong foundation look like for a startup? Or Yeah, but essentially,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
So I've recently been like interviewing a lot of companies and trying to understand what this framework looks like. So I have a 6-step framework which I use, but obviously there's that preliminary kind of structure that needs to exist, and I think that is lacking in a lot of companies. So they grow to a certain stage and then they go and hire like very top heavy positions that are not necessarily required, and they don't feed into that user journey or that secret sauce that they need. So I think like the first stage is understanding clearly what your operations is going to look like, and then you can determine, where are my skills gaps, how can I scale, where do I have particular risks around shortages, maybe overspending, lack of spending. So I think it's really that piece around, what does a business actually look like, or your business actually look like.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it's mapping out that very initial structure and making sure that you're very clear on that and how that's going to sort of build going forward.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you do say maybe you can't even map out that initial stage, or you do map it out, but you can't really figure out how to move it forward. How do you identify and sort of fix those inefficiencies in your structure or what you're trying to build?
So I run a masterclass on this, and I focus it around your hiring plan for scaling. It's a nice like interactive activity. So in the Mangrove framework, we have 6 steps. So the first one is core identification, and this is where you sit down. And what I like to tell people to do is, like, imagine you're your user and you're coming into your business. What does their journey actually look like? And that can very clearly tell you like what your business process. So maybe there's onboarding,
Okay.
like all the way through to offboarding, whatever the stages are, whether you're a fintech company, you're a HR tech company, or even you're selling consumable goods as like a shop. There's always a user journey, and that will help you to define the core elements of your business. And it doesn't matter how big your business is. Typically what we see is between 3 to like 6 or 7 core pieces. And these are kind of like your services that you deliver. The next stage is to map those pieces. So what are the people, the processes, the technologies, and third parties to deliver each component? And then we look at risks around that. So what I like to do is sit down with companies and say, okay, at the end of the day, we want to serve our customers. If this particular thing were to disappear, would we have any customer impacts? Would we have any financial impacts to your revenue, operations? So there's a few categories that we run through. It's just very high level.
Yeah.
And then the next piece is prioritization. So because we've just been through, we know the pieces of our business. We know what's like we need to deliver them, and we understand the key risks around it. You can very easily see that's a very important ingredient in my business, and this is less. So then you see the gaps as well. So you can then go and create a hiring plan and say, for instance, like, you have 10 key ingredients, but maybe only 1 or 2 teams servicing that. That will tell you like, okay, that's not scalable. We either need more people, or maybe we need a third party to intervene here. And so you can start to think about how we would then scale the company.
So if we were to take that whole sort of those 6 steps through if you could give us an example of a very simple business or a very simplified example. I know there's nothing really easy or simple in this business, but if you had to give us like a very basic type of business and an example of sort of from the moment someone walks through, what are the sort of the different things that you would see? Like, okay, this is the onboarding of the person. This is the where you would need the hiring, where that would come in. Sort of just walk us through that just to make it a little more concrete.
Okay, sure. So I always use a HR tech company because everyone has tried to apply for a job or like hire someone. Also, surprisingly, I work with a lot of HR companies. So the first stage is you do your onboarding. So this is where the customer comes in or the client comes in who's trying to look for someone that they're hiring. So that's a very integral piece. You might have your technology that you've created to onboard them. So that might be your platform. You might have a customer service team. And you might have like a CRM to manage all the information. These are just like high level examples. The next stage is you have the recruitment process, right? So this is where you're trying to match talent, you're trying to get them jobs. It's that whole process around them filling out all of their applications. Again, there'll be some technologies around there. Maybe you have the engineering team supporting that. You still might have customer service and operations involved in there. You'll have a bunch of technologies. Potentially you have a third party that does ID checking to make sure that we're validating. The next stage is you want to pay people. You need to pay your staff.
Very important.
You also need to pay the people to make sure. So that could be another core element. And then obviously, like, I think the next step would be like we're offboarding, right? So that's the customer journey. And so they're your 4 core elements of your business. But underneath this, you have the things that make your business your business. So a lot of companies I work with have like an AI model that they've developed. So one could be like an interviewing bot. It does a lot of the processes for them.
Okay.
Another one might be like a matching algorithm. So they have their IP. So that's another component. Their platform does not work without that.
Okay.
Yes. And then you have all of the technology piece. So this is where your engineering teams and the platform, because it can't run itself. So that's kind of your 6 key ingredients that you would have as a business.
Wow.
And when we map out those pieces, we can then see, here are our efficiencies. Maybe we're over-reliant here. So that's kind of how it works.
Wow, thank you. I think that's a really good way to just show the importance of mapping it all out. Because if you can't see all the pieces, you won't really understand how they all fit together.
Yes.
Awesome.
And then if we pull one out,
the company sort of falls apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's easy to see how maybe when you're running a growing business, it's possible to overlook some of the key areas that are likely to make you actually quite efficient, because there's a temptation to focus on the big picture and the next big step, to the point where you're not trying to be very efficient at this stage, thinking that we will refine efficiencies at a future date.
Yeah.
And then when you build bad habits, it's very hard to break them. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say to a lot of the companies I work with, like, you want to drive a Ferrari right now, but what you need is a bicycle. So like, let's think about
Ferrari to bicycle to Ferrari.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, when they build stuff, they optimize it for like having hundreds of thousands of users. I'm like, you have 2 people on your platform.
Optimize for those 2 first.
Let's like scale this back.
I think that's very humbling to tell a founder.
I know.
You have 2 people, you know.
But that's the thing is, like, I know this data, so I can like be very, I think, straightforward about it. And then at the end of the day, like, they end up saving lots of money on their credits because we've optimized things. We've thought about what is the best usage. Do we actually need this? And then their company can last a lot longer. So.
Absolutely. And now to build onto that, you know, you already gave us a good example of building operational efficiency. We'll perhaps maybe discuss tools that enable operational efficiency. First of all, what do you think is data a very important component in terms of building operational efficiency? What place does data sit? That's the first bit of it. Maybe you can speak into that.
I think data is super important. And that's why I'm very like adamant that we need to understand everything in our business, because once we map the components, we have amazing data. And this can help you with having conversations around cost efficiency. Even in expansion, we know how much things are costing us, what they look like, what does that process then look like to expand. You can have a proper conversation rather than being like, tomorrow we're expanding into this country, you know, which is usually what happens. It's kind of like, oh, we saw a need there, but we don't know all of the components to be able to actually deliver that. And that can sometimes trip up companies. But actually had an interesting conversation yesterday. So I host like little co-working clubs where I ask people to just come and hang out that are founders. We work together, have conversations. It's just trying to like make more authentic connections within the ecosystem. And there was a founder and he was saying, I'm really wasting a lot of money on transport. And I said, okay, but are you, this is for the people that work in his company, are you mapping or like categorizing all of the spending from previous months? And he was like, yes. I said, okay, so why are you not looking at the data to see who is consistent in their travel and who is not? And like, that's a very simple process. He can just go have a look and then he can see who's taking advantage of like the system and who's actually consistent in their spending. Because he's like, my transport costs are so all over the place, yet there's no sales roles. They're all doing the same thing every day. So realistically, like, you shouldn't have such huge fluctuations. So I think data is really important and we need to start leveraging this a lot more from an operational perspective as founders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it sounds like it's not just having the data, but actually using it, right? Like, because in that sense, the data exists, but going out and actually using it to sort of understand where the problems are.
Yeah. And so like in this example, he is using this data for financial and like bookkeeping purposes. But it's like, no, data can be used in so many different ways.
Interesting.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, absolutely agree that data is a very key component in terms of, developing efficiencies around your business. But let's talk about tools. I know, I mean, it looks good saying, okay, get your data. But first of all, tracking data is a lot of work. Adrian, you know about timesheets, you know.
I know, as lawyers, you have to keep track of your time.
Yeah, exactly. You have to keep track of...
But there's also a big issue when you don't have data, right?
Absolutely. It makes it difficult. So So let's what do you think around the tools? How can businesses develop? First of all, develop tools that are practical for them at the stage they're in, and in order to enable, number one, to collect data. Then number two, synthesize the data, sort of distill it into a way that it can help them in terms of making decisions properly.
Yeah.
So perhaps you can speak into that, tools and data. How do you get the proper tools for that?
I just want to do a shameless plug and be like Mangrove. But I know that's not always the case. People are not at the right stages. So in the early stages, it's really simple. Today we have so many amazing tools. You have like Google Cloud for startups, you have AWS for startups, you have Azure for startups. And so they have all of these programs where you get credits, you get access to all of these like power dashboards. You can even just have something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet, and you can plug this into the analytics platforms and you can create dashboards and things like that. It's all drop and drag. Also, if you get stuck, you can literally log a ticket and an engineer will come online with you and show you how to set this stuff up. So I think it's really about understanding the resources that are available, getting access to them. And then when you don't know how to do something, there's always help available. So like asking for help. I think a lot of the stuff that I've built in my business has been through this process. I don't know, like at the moment I'm setting up a CRM and it's been like really intense because our sales team is growing and every second day I'm logging a ticket with the engineer.
CRM?
A customer relationship management system for sales. Sorry.
Wow. So you're building this in-house sort of?
No, so we're trying to like basically use the stuff that's available to us, but it's very, there's so many settings and I feel like I take one step, I set something up and then I can't do something else. So I'm like, okay, I need to go back to the engineers, get them on a call, but it's a slow process, but I'm learning all this stuff along the way. And the support and help is free. And they're from like Microsoft and these places. So I think you can find ways.
Sounds like it was be something very helpful once you actually have it all set up and fine-tuned the way you need it to.
Yes.
So tools, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's like a million. You just need to
definitely. And on the cost element, I mean, I guess the ones that you've mentioned, honestly, I'm not very conversant with the tools, but the ones that you've mentioned are sort of easy for, founders and growing businesses to use. They're not, you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for it.
I don't pay anything for any of the stuff we use. It's all on credits from the startup. So the way that I scaled my business, and I haven't spent any money, is I exhausted the AWS credits. So that took us to about 6 months because we decided we didn't want to raise. If you raise, it can last you a lot longer because you can then put in codes and get more credits. We built our MVP and that was just kind of like very scrappy. The next stage is we went to Google Cloud because I had even more credits. So that took us to like a year and a half. And so we built the reason why we did it in this order is with Google Cloud, you basically have a mirror version of everything on Azure. So once we exhausted our credits, I now went over to Azure and said, I want to be part of your startup hub. I'm a female founder that's building a tech company. And they gave us like, $100,000 worth of credits and a year free subscriptions to everything. And this isn't just available to me, like it's available to everyone. So I think it's really important to like understand the resources that are available and utilize them in the best way. So we haven't had any operational costs just yet. Slack also does like a year of free stuff. Notion. I think you just got to know where all the freebies are. And
absolutely.
Do you put these like in your newsletter? Sorry to plug your newsletter before you plug it, but you should do like a dump on all these different free credits that you get from.
I actually use this in my startup program. So I use a lot of this information to help the companies I work with. And so, like recently, I just met a company that does, like they set up all of this and help onboard startups. So they don't actually have to go and do it physically themselves the way that I did. So I always recommend go chat to these people. They'll help you. There's a person who does AI very similar with all the credits. So it's just about building that network and helping people.
Wow. Sounds very scrappy and resilient.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend money.
Well, it makes sense.
I mean, it's a smart thing, to build efficiencies.
Yeah,
direct
100%.
Money where it must be used.
Yeah, especially in the early days growing your startup.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, or Tim talked about sort of thinking about the big picture and sort of maybe the small, what's right in front of you. You talked about optimizing for a bicycle instead of optimizing for a Ferrari. A lot of people the temptation is to think, okay, if we just scale to Uganda and Egypt and all these other places, we'll be in a good place. But they're trying to move a bit too quickly, perhaps. So how can startups grow faster? Like everyone wants that acceleration, to just get to that speed, but without compromising this operational stability or that, resilience within their company? How do you sort of balance those two?
Yeah, so I think there's this thing I like to call it like the magpie effect.
Okay.
It's like anytime you see something shiny, you just want to go and chase it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's not necessarily good for you. So
Yeah.
a lot of the companies that I have worked with that have done really well, they solidified their services and products in one market, and they had a lot of temptation for partnerships and scaling elsewhere. But they just really understood what it is that they were delivering and refined it. And then now they're like in 12 countries within, a year or two. So you can scale much faster once you understand the pieces of your business, what they look like and what you do well. So yeah, it's like not just chasing, oh, we got 4 customers in
Yeah.
Tanzania, let's go to Tanzania.
We're basically there. Let's start an office. Yeah.
Precisely. It's
Okay.
not good because your business is already not established, and then you're stretching yourself so thin.
Yeah. So optimize for those 2 customers in Kenya and get it really right for them.
Bring on your customer base.
Yeah.
And the thing too, especially like with a lot of the ones who want to scale in multiple countries, so typically like in regulated industries. And so if you have a few customers here, a few customers there, it's much harder to then scale beyond partnerships and get your own licenses. Whereas if you have a very solid foundation, you understand your operations, it's much easier to apply for licenses. And then that's what keeps you going in the long run, is having all this stuff for yourself.
Interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool. And I think a lot of folks on this show or that have been on here have spoken about the importance of partnerships, which I think are really good. But it sounds like there's also that drawback if you're trying to really stretch yourself through these partnerships before establishing yourself as a business and sort of strengthening yourself in your core market before going on to make those partnerships happen.
I think there's different kinds of partnerships. There's partnerships locally that help you grow and extend, to get more clients. And I kind of see these more as like collaborations because it's mutually beneficial. When you have the partnerships where you're relying on people for the core delivery of like, you need this license to be able to service this market, that's a proper partnership. That's quite different. And they're the ones which you need to be, I think, a bit more mindful about entering into, because managing partnerships is not just like, oh, we're all now in business. You have regulatory compliance, you have operational compliance, you have all of these like due diligence factors that you now like KPIs and all this type of stuff, and that's a lot of stress for a small company.
Interesting. I'm just gonna sort of move on to a more big picture thing that I hopefully sort of any founder or startup or entrepreneur watching would get some good value out of, which is if you had to name, let's say, 3 things that you consider extremely important for the success of a startup. I mean, I feel like you've already mentioned plenty of them, but if you had to just mention just 3 or 2 that you think are really key to the success of a startup or entrepreneurial venture, what would those be?
Yeah, so I think it's really understanding your core offering and then having the business transparency and alignment around that.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of startups have all these silos and people working on stuff like they're doing some version of this and another version. It's all very similar because there's that lack of clarity. So I think that really helps people to grow.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, when you look at the future of startup resilience in Africa, what developments excite you? When you look at that, what particularly emerging trends and business practices excite you about the future of startup resilience, especially in Africa?
So the reason why I really love working on the continent is people have a really fresh perspective about what resilience is, and they're very intrigued around how to use this for their growth. And so that is really exciting for me because it's very welcomed. In other parts of the world, it's considered something that's only needed for big companies. And that's kind of when it's a bit too late, unfortunately. We can always fix stuff, but it's going to be very costly. It's going to take a lot of time. So the idea that people here are very open to building stuff in from day one as a success metrics is really, really nice.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what do you think about AI, artificial intelligence, automation, and perhaps data analytics? What do you think? What do you think the role? What is the role do you think that they are playing and they're likely to be playing into the future for startup resilience and growing businesses? Really, I mean, not necessarily restricted to startups, but equally could be service provision and all.
I'm very excited about AI. I actually just spoke at a
Mhm.
like a launch event for an AI company in Kenya the
Wow.
other day, and
Oh,
that's all we talk about. We had a fireside chat and we involved people from the audience to come and sit on stage and give their perspectives about how they utilize AI in their companies and how they use it for operational excellence. And I think it's fascinating because you have now the ability to do so much more with so much less if you use it in the right way.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it's just really, I mean, I met a coffee farmer that's using DLT in his trees, and the way that he supplies coffee.
DLT.
Oh, distributed ledger technology.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So what this is, they use it a lot in the financial industries, and it is kind of like the backbone of a lot of cryptocurrencies. It's a
Yeah,
ledger
the
that
blockchain, essentially.
precisely you can't manipulate it. And in the coffee industry, this is super interesting
Is this
because
essentially like the entire value
supply
chain?
chain, precisely,
Exactly.
and
And
that's what
mapping that out.
for resilience, it's like perfect. So
Wow.
yeah, I was really excited to learn about these things and just how people are utilizing, for instance, like the data that they have around their crops to understand how they're going to yield going forward in the next season, looking at how they would also like optimize what plants they're using. So there's like lots of different ways that you can use it. And this is stuff that wasn't really available before.
Yeah.
And it's going to make their business more successful. So
Did anyone say anything sort of really practical, a way that they're using, say, AI in their day-to-day business, like something as basic as like ChatGPT or whatever for their business? Anything that stood out?
So many companies are using AI agents.
Okay.
So like previously you had a whole team that might be doing like, you know, lead finding, reaching out to emails. This is built into a lot of like the customer management tools that you have. And so now it's doing a lot of this for you. You basically just set up a workflow. It will go and validate the emails. It will find information for you and get you to the point where you just need to have like a call with somebody.
Wow.
So I think you're saving so much time, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
But let me ask another question I've always wanted to ask. And is AI at this stage, do you think part of the AI is that it's become a fad? And do you think a lot of people properly understand what it is? I mean, we've had moments. We've had blockchain. It was blockchain, 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 blockchain. I think the discussion of blockchain seems to have gone a little quiet. But there's still some good utility for blockchain. But do you think we are running the same risk on AI, such that there will be a lot of excitement, but one that does not result in the deepening of skills and deepening of your understanding on how to use it and how to, leverage AI to do business? Do you think that's a risk, or?
I think it can make people lazy.
Uh-huh.
I've noticed this. So I love to work with like grads in my business or people who have just come out of school. Give them an opportunity to work on a small project, and then I can give them a nice reference, or if they're really good at what they do, keep them in my company.
Okay.
But what I found is people are very excitable. They will come in, they'll try a few things, and basically everything is just a regurgitation of ChatGPT. So I think I'm always just like, we need to put a bit more effort and like thought into this. It's really good to use these tools, but like when you're copying and pasting and it still has the prompt in there, this is not ideal, so I think like that's a problem.
Wow, you left the prompt in there,
yeah. But like you can tell there's like a dash where there shouldn't be a dash.
But I hope the prompt was, at least when you saw it, it was like, wow, nice prompt. Oh, are you even disappointed with
I'm just not impressed by that.
I just need to tell this Mangrove lady something. Give me something to tell her.
Yeah, okay.
So here's one we usually have for guests on the show, which is we're essentially putting together a time capsule for the founders of the future. It sounds like you talk to a lot of founders in your day-to-day, but if you had to, we transported you 40, 50 years into the future, and you're in front of all the founders of the next generation who are building the next companies that are going to sort of change the way we do things on the continent and beyond. And we asked you to say just one thing to them. What would that one thing be?
I would say like be practical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Practical.
Be practical.
Because everyone's trying to build the next Ferrari. And the realistic, like the outcome of it is there's not very many Ferraris in the world, right?
Absolutely.
And the ones that are sustainable and have the most impact are bicycles. So like, let's be practical about what we're building. Yeah.
Awesome. It sounds like that's probably also advice you're giving people today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because like what do you want? You want to be like a stressed millionaire?
Yeah.
Like, this is not going to happen. majority of the businesses that are really successful in Africa are just like your everyday businesses that have
Yep.
turned into corporations, and they have the most impact. So like we should be focusing on this type of stuff.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. And now we have a surprise question for you. But it may not come to you as so much of a surprise because we've asked it to so many guests that have appeared on our podcast before.
Mm.
And the question that we ask is, and which I'm going to ask you today, is if you were to have a superpower, what would that superpower be, and why would you choose that superpower?
I love this question. So when I was young, I used to watch this TV show about this girl, and she was in some like oil spill crash thing. And then she would basically like turn herself invisible and like move around. I would do the same thing. It was so amazing.
What was this called? What was it called?
I can't remember, but I used to love it as a kid. So for context, like I didn't really grow up being able to watch television. So whenever I saw like a show, I was like, oh my goodness. And this was one of the ones that we were allowed to watch. But I feel like this is such a cool superpower because she could just like stop, disappear, you know, and be like in a whole new place. I wouldn't have to catch planes.
Oh, okay.
I would
so
just
she
be in like...
she has
so you
invisibility
disappear and then you teleport.
and she teleports.
Yeah, basically. She can just move to different places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
It's very cool.
I would be like, Colombia.
But why would you want that superpower?
Well, she's lived in 22 countries.
Oh
so.
yeah, she would be moving across all of them in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I could be there tomorrow, here today.
You wouldn't have to move your things either. You just go wherever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Very interesting superpower. And what has been an interesting thing that you have learned or discovered this week?
I think the conversations we were having on the panel around how people are utilizing AI in their businesses are really, really interesting. Like so many people are being very innovative in the ways that they're applying it. So yeah, I think, like learning about coffee farming and crop yielding, I was like, this is amazing. And these are very early stage startups as well. Like they're not, you know, scale ups or advanced companies.
Wow. So they're implementing this right from day one.
Yeah. And it's really helping them to grow. So that was really cool. I enjoyed learning about that.
Super fascinating.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Very fascinating. I think one of the things we'll take up from this conversation is AI. It's an important thing that you must figure out how to utilize for your business.
In the correct ways,
In the correct ways, of course.
Not just a chat, but...
It's funny, our very first episode that we ever did, which was here, we talked about AI. That was my interesting thing of the week, actually. We talked about AI.
Yeah.
I forget now what the context was, but it was just so fascinating to me even back then. And I still think it's very fascinating and quickly moving. So like AI agents now and new models coming out every day. So it's a very fast moving space. So interested to see what happens. So let's see. By the time next year we're recording, we'll see where things are at. If I don't know, I don't want to be doom and gloom, but there's a lot going on in the world. I don't know where we're gonna be at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, on that
hopefully the world
optimistic note, I'll close us out.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Amity, so much for being here. This has been really amazing. Thank you for this conversation, just talking about operational resilience, sustainability within your business, and sort of identifying that secret sauce that really gets your company going, and then eventually, you know, kicking up to that Ferrari stage, hopefully down the line one day, if you're being practical.
Yes.
But in case people want to reach you, or they want to reach Mangrove, or even these sort of co-working clubs that you talked about, I feel like there's a few things that you should plug just so that anyone who's watching or listening can, you know, tap into those different resources or reach you or your company. Where should they look?
I don't have any social media except for LinkedIn, so I think that's probably the best place to find me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I publish a lot of stuff on there talking about what we're doing, our newsletters, our free resources, everything about the pilot studies and these co-working sessions. So yeah, if you want to find me, I think that's the best, most concentrated like nucleus of knowledge.
Awesome. So all things Amity and Mangrove, check out LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yeah.
And also just to say that you guys are so consistent on LinkedIn. It's actually amazing to me. I was saying this before we even got on air. There are times when I wake up and if the Mangrove hasn't posted something, I get worried. I'm like, what's happening? Because these guys, every single day, there's some sort of piece of content. Either it's a video or a newsletter or something. And I think it just goes back to your point about storytelling and your brand. So I think you said Charles, the person who told you your name was pretty crappy to begin with. He'd be very proud right now to see what you guys do.
I'm like, do you see what we're doing with all your stuff?
So shout out to him as well. So an amazing job. Thank you. So, and thanks to our viewers and listeners everywhere. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate your support. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any other questions, things we didn't touch on that you wanted us to explore further, just let us know in the comments. Share this with your friends, with your enemies, as Tim likes to say.
Yep, we don't mind.
And look out for us in another couple of weeks with another episode. So thanks so much. And that's the Full Scale Podcast for today. Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.